kind of feels from what I've seen so far in some of these statements as though we're back to square one, essentially, in that, has Trump really gained anything from this? It's difficult to see. He's obviously going to try and paint it as some sort of victory, but we'll have to wait till we see the details.
You and Howard and Scott are working overtime, making deals with other countries. Remember a few months ago, the press was saying, do you really have anybody of any interest? Well, we just signed with China yesterday, right? Just signed with China. We have everybody. We're not going to make deals with everybody. Some we're just going to send them a letter, say, thank you very much. You're going to pay 25, 35, 45%. That's the easy way to do it. And my people don't want to do it that way. They want to do some of it, but they want to make more deals than I would do. But we're having some great deals.
When it comes to President Trump in regard to a trade deal with China, he has said that a trade deal has been signed, President Trump. He hasn't really gone into any more detail. Beijing hasn't confirmed it, but there's been some movement on Chinese exports of rare earth minerals, which would suggest some progress has been made between the two countries. Well, Ian King is the Times' business columnist and markets commentator. He's with us now. Good morning, Ian.
Morning.
What do you make of this? What do you think is actually happening in your professional estimation? How confident are you about a potential US-China trade deal? How reassuring will this all be for global markets and the broader global economy, do you think?
Well, as you say, there hasn't been an awful lot of detail put out by the US. We got this statement last night from them saying that a framework had been agreed on. Now, this was the framework that the US and China thrashed out here in London earlier this month. But I can bring you some breaking news on that, which is that this afternoon, obviously there are a few hours ahead of us, the Chinese Ministry of Commerce has put out a statement confirming that a framework agreement has been reached. And in this statement, they go on to say that some of the restrictive measures imposed by the United States are going to be lifted. Now, if you recall, Donald Trump raised tariffs on Chinese imports from 30% to 55%. Beijing's tariffs the other way on US imports are only stuck at 10%. So, I mean, it's until we get the firm detail, it's hard to say what that means. But it feels very much as though as though Trump has relented on these 55% tariffs. And as you mentioned there, rare earth exports. Now, this was one thing Xi Jinping anticipated. The Chinese anticipated that Trump was going to do this, and they started to put curbs on exports of rare earths, which are these metals that are used in all sorts of industrial components, mobile phones, computers, electric cars. They started to restrict exports of those to the United States, which was obviously very, very unhelpful for US manufacturers. And it appears that in return, Beijing is going to lift some of those. It kind of feels from what I've seen so far in some of these statements as though we're back to square one, essentially, in that, has Trump really gained anything from this? It's difficult to see. He's obviously going to try and paint it as some sort of victory, but we'll have to wait till we see the details. But as you say, this will be taken as quite encouraging. You saw Wall Street, all the main indices on Wall Street rise by nearly 1% last night. The S&P 500 now within 1% of its all-time high. So this will go down quite well. But as I say, remain to see the details.
David Charter, who is assistant US editor for The Times, joins us. Evening, David.
Good evening, Kate, from Washington, D.C.
Let's talk about the Pete Hegseth press conference then. He was rallying, wasn't he, against leaked reports that America's missile strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities hadn't been a huge success. Here is Pete Hegseth.
Someone had an agenda to try to muddy the waters and make it look like this historic strike wasn't successful. The DIA that put that report out says that this is a preliminary low-confidence report and will continue to be refined as additional intelligence becomes available. How about this one? This is a new one from the UN, the United Nations. No friend of the United States, or certainly Israel often. Here's the head of the UN Atomic Energy Agency this morning. U.S. and Israeli strikes caused enormous damage to Iran's nuclear sites.
He then went on to criticise the American media, singled out reporters in the room, saying they loved cheering against Trump. Here's just a small part of it.
Because you, and I mean specifically you, the press, specifically you, the press corps, because you cheer against Trump so hard, it's like in your DNA and in your blood to cheer against Trump, because you want him not to be successful so bad. So let's take half-truths, spun information, leaked information, and then spin it in every way we can to try to cause doubt and manipulate the public mind over whether or not our brave pilots were successful.
There you go. So it turned into a bit of a rant, didn't it, David Charter, aiming at the press, saying, look, why aren't you believing us? How did this go down?
Well, this row is just deepening, and it's really of Donald Trump's own making, because he came out just hours after the mission on Saturday night, if you remember, and said that Iran's nuclear facilities were completely and totally obliterated. Then we had the leak that the Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth, was talking about there, of this initial early preliminary low confidence report suggesting that, in fact, the Iran's program may only have been set back by a few months. That's what's caused the anger in all this. And the administration has put out a couple of more assessments since, including by the head of the CIA, Director John Radcliffe, saying that Iran's nuclear program was severely damaged. But that didn't go as far as Trump went on the night. And also Hegseth's message today was that the media had totally jumped the gun because of their prejudices and their hatred of Trump. That the media was running with this report, this preliminary report, way too soon, and should wait for the assessments to come in. But that's not what Trump did. So they're hoist by their own petard, really, on this one. I can see their point. That they're very upset that the leak happened, and they've got the FBI searching for the leaker, who's going to face severe consequences, etc., when they're caught. But the fact is that this morning's press conference had some fascinating and brilliant new details about the actual planning and accuracy of the bombing raid.
Yeah.
Those factual details were all given by the Joint Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Raisin-Kane.
Should we hear from him,
really
David? I've
amazing
got
stuff.
a clip here, and then we can mop up what else we heard. So here is Dan
Yeah.
Kane.
You won't see an impact crater because they're designed to deeply bury and then function. I know there's been a lot of questions about that. All 6 weapons at each vent at Fordo went exactly where they were intended to go. A bomb has 3 effects that causes damage: blast, fragmentation, and overpressure. The majority of the damage we assessed based on our extensive modeling was a blast layer combined with the impulse extending from the shock. Imagine what this looks like 6 times over.
Yeah. What else did we hear, David?
So let's just do the new factual details, which were really fascinating. The reason that you saw those photographs, those satellite photographs showing 3 little holes and not like some massive bomb crater, is that those are the 3 ventilation outlets that had been covered by the Iranians with concrete protective slabs. That the first bombing wave, so 1 bomb each, there's 2 sets of these ventilation shafts, destroyed those concrete slabs and exposed the 3 holes. And then the middle one of those is the main shaft, and the other 2 holes are the branches of the shaft. So they then dropped bombs 2, 3, 4, and 5 right down the main central shaft, according to General Kane. And then they had some 2 backup bombs available just in case, which they then also dropped on Fordo down those holes. And so that's why you don't see massive craters, because he explained about how the fuse being delayed timed to go off at a certain depth. So each bomb would detonate at a slightly lower depth to make sure they caught all of the underground facility. And they had good quotes from the pilots saying that there was a blinding white light, like it was suddenly daytime in the middle of the night in Iran. So they know the bombs went off deep below ground. And again, fascinating information about just how long they'd been planning this mission, that they'd had 2 people from a special defense agency dedicated to studying Fordo since 2009.
Yeah.
And that was their only job for those 2 people since 2009, was to study every single satellite image and piece of intelligence on the exact construction of all the protections and the vulnerabilities of that site. So it was a really great factual briefing. And then, of course, we get Pete Hegseth, the defense secretary, who's got to do the political job, because the general said, I am not doing bomb damage assessment. That's not me. That's the intelligence services do that, the intelligence community. And Pete Hegseth did not have any new intelligence information. He drew together what's already publicly known. And that includes there's the leak, which he dismissed as premature and low confidence, which it is. Then there was the CIA assessment, which is that it was severely damaged. And then there's an assessment from the Israelis that it was extensively damaged. And that quote that you heard from the International Atomic Energy Agency as well, saying really substantial damage. So there are a lot of indications and assessments that a lot of damage was done. And lo and behold, we have some indications from European intelligence assessments today that the uranium got away. The heavily enriched uranium largely wasn't down there.
This is the 400 kilograms of it.
This is the 400 kilograms of Iran's highly enriched uranium, which doesn't, according to some security assessments, and this is a European one, had been moved. This has been contradicted by President Trump today, who says that satellite images of vehicles at the site a few days ago were the construction vehicles of people who were putting in the concrete protections to all the ventilation shafts, and it wasn't moving the uranium. And Pete Hegseth also said he'd seen no intelligence to suggest that the uranium was moved. So we've now got a row about whether the status of Iran's highly enriched uranium, where is it? Nobody seems to really know for certain. We've just got a lot of assertions being made by different sources at the moment.
Yeah, that one remains hanging in the balance. John's been in touch, actually. You might be able to answer this. In your opinion, David Charter, would it be fair to say that Pete Hegseth is even more thin-skinned than his boss? Amazing outburst, he said. What do you think from being in the room or nearby assessing the way that Pete Hegseth comes across? How do you interpret him?
I've got two things to say about that. I think he's a bit of a poacher turned gamekeeper. He was a Fox News presenter before he became a member of the administration. And quite amazingly, he picked on one of the journalists personally at a briefing who was the Fox News security
turned on one of his
correspondent,
former colleagues, didn't he?
Who and called her the worst, or one of the worst. And she is by common consent one of the best. She's very, very experienced. And I watched a lot of the Fox coverage on the night, and it was really good and informative in my view. So it was kind of an incredible attack, I thought. But moreover, I think the general point is that Pete Hegseth has learnt from the boss. He is a bit of a mini-me when it comes to Donald Trump, and he's been out there politically to back up Trump's line that the nuclear facilities were completely and totally obliterated. So that's what he's going to do, and he's going to use the Trump method, which is to fight and fight and fight as hard as you can, especially when your back's to the wall. It's to fight 10 times harder. We've seen this over and over again from Trump, and Pete Hegseth plays from the same playbook. Yeah, look,
so does Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, I think anyway. Let's talk about what's happening tonight. So Donald Trump is just about to hold an event that'll look to put pressure on Republican senators to pass his big, beautiful bill. Here is the White House press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, talking up the event earlier tonight.
Later this afternoon here at the White House, the president will host a One Big Beautiful event in the East Room to rally Republicans to get the One Big Beautiful bill across the finish line. At that event, he will be joined by everyday Americans from across the country who will massively benefit from the common sense policies and provisions within this bill. This is the largest tax cut for working and middle-class Americans in history, and it's going to put more money into the pockets of hardworking Americans.
Yeah, the bill sets out an all-encompassing tax and spending agenda and claims that the average American household will be $10,000 better off per year. It's the largest tax cut, with the largest tax cut for lower and middle income families in American history. Opponents of the bill are, they're yet to be convinced about the generous tax cuts and whether it is all affordable. Just in a minute or so, David, because we've not got much time with you, will this do the job tonight? Do you think senators will and the voices of dissent within Donald Trump's party will come round this evening?
I don't know about this evening. The votes are looming. There are perhaps one or two Republican senators who are still resisting this bill quite firmly. But I do think they've got a majority. They can lose 3 because of the majority and still pass it, because the vice president, that would mean a 50-50 split in the Senate. Then the vice president passes as the president of the Senate can pass a bill on a split like that. So I think they'll get it. I don't know exactly how they'll get there with the changes to the bill, but that's in a way that's in the weeds. And the main thing will be that Trump does get his massive second-term legislation that he thinks will cement his legacy for decades to come.
David, thanks so much for being with us. David Charter, Assistant US Editor, excuse me, of The Times. Thank you, David.